All right, next muscle group we're going to look at is pecs. Again, as people who type and work on phones all day, we tend to be flexed and internally rotated, which is a short position for the pecs. So we need to pre-test them and we need to stretch them just like we've done the other tissue. So I'll do this side so you guys can see it better on the camera. If I'm doing pec major, I'm looking at about 120 degrees of shoulder flexion and abduction. So this is that pec position. Once again, because pec attaches to the trunk here, as I start to move him, if I see trunk movement, that means I've hit my first resistance. Do you feel any discomfort there?
No.
Pec attaches here in the front of the shoulder. So I'm going to try to protect him with my arm and support him here, and then grab onto as close to the insertion in the front of the shoulder as I can. The longer your lever with the stretch, the more likely you're going to hurt them. So you want to try to stabilize here and get to a shorter lever with your hand. Obviously, the other stabilization point would be here on the trunk. With your female clients, that would be something that can be kind of tricky. What you would have them do maybe is hold their own other hand on their trunk, and you can help add support here. Then we're just going to get down into that first resistance, which again, Lucas is pretty mobile, which is great. This is my first resistance. Do you feel any stretch there at all? So he's pretty mobile. Most of your clients are going to hit first resistance about here, and then second resistance, we're going to be about here. This is our pre-test. To prime the tissue, we could use a lacrosse ball, have them find spots with a lacrosse ball, usually right about here, along the clavicle, just below the clavicle, is one of the origination points for the pec. If we work that kind of clavicular portion of the pec, you often get a lot of benefit from there. The sternal portion of the pec's a little less comfortable because of the ribs, so I tend not to work that as much with the lacrosse ball. So I'll have them either lay on their stomach with a lacrosse ball here, or press up against a wall with a lacrosse ball here. So then to get into the stretch, it's a little tricky. Again, we want them to be nice and tight like they're gonna get punched. I'm gonna add some pressure on the rib cage so that the rib cage stays nice and stable, and then I'm gonna pull them into that partner stretch for pec. Again, shortening that lever is really, really important so you don't risk hurting the front of their shoulder. The pec muscle that's even harder to stretch than the pec major is the pec minor. So pec minor starts on the front, the first maybe rib 3 through 6, and then attaches to what's called the coracoid process in the front of the shoulder blade. This one is a particular problem. If you can see for Lucas, his pec major was nice and mobile, but his pec minor is super tight. His shoulder is forward off the table by quite a bit. And there's a good 2-3 finger gap between his shoulder and the table. That's pec minor. To stretch pec minor, I'm going to actually get my hand, so here's the front of his shoulder, just medial to that is the coracoid process. I'm going to try to get my hands on the coracoid process and stretch him this way, okay? The challenge here is if you've got a table and someone who's got muscle bulk or any sort of soft tissue bulk, when I go to press, it's going to be hard to get a good stretch. So I've got a half foam roll here. If your client can tolerate it, that can be something that can be helpful. A rolled up long towel, if they can't tolerate the harder foam roll, could be useful as well. So let's take this half foam roll under you here. Try to lift your hips up onto it as well. There we go. All right, so we've got him on the half foam roll now, so we've got even more space to work with here. So if I get here and I press on the coracoid process, now I've got a heck of a useful stretch with a nice short lever. I'm protecting the front of his shoulder because I'm pressing from here. I'm not pressing on his shoulder. Do you feel a stretch there?
Yeah, it feels good.
Okay. The contract relax here is not him pressing up against into my hand. It's him taking an easy deep breath. As he breathes in, the rib cage expands, and the expansion of the rib cage is actually where his origination of the muscle is. So we can stretch it pretty effectively just by having him take easy deep breaths. Do you feel a bigger stretch when you breathe in?
Yeah.
And then it feels a little less as you breathe out?
Yeah, release when I breathe out.
As he breathes out, I might take up just a little bit of slack here. This is one of the most important partner stretches you can possibly do, because to stretch pec minor by yourself is really hard. Okay.